Yesterday, Donald Trump announced that he would be pulling the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord, which should, of course, surprise no one since he promised to do so multiple times throughout the election. And today, less than 24 hours after, the world reacts. So we've got reactions from both opponents and proponents of this move. First, Vice President Mike Pence have a couple of his statements about how much he understands about global concerns over climate change, beginning with this.
So we've demonstrated real leadership, we've demonstrated real progress, but for some reason or another, this issue of climate change has emerged as a paramount issue for the left in this country and around the world. And through Kyoto, through President Obama's cap and trade agenda, and then in the last year of his administration, to have America saddled in an international agreement in the Paris Accord, I think put a real burden on our economy and on our people. It was a bad deal for America.
So before we get on to substantive and real comments, as usual, nonsense, fun comments, we showed a picture there of Mike Pence as we played the audio for you. And it must be noted for the record that, first of all, that the squinters of the world it's a telltale sign that you're a fraud. And mostly politicians and people in the media do it. And he has a power ranking of number 2 in squinting. He's almost constantly squinting. Obviously, overall, number 1 power ranking by a significant margin. Still, Diane Sawyer.
What about Clint Eastwood?
I think Clinton was a pretty big squinter.
Yeah, no. Yes, Clinton was definitely. Yeah. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Clint Eastwood, I would rank that as a genuine squint, as opposed to you're right. Either the sun's in your eye or your Clint Eastwood is okay.
Except when he was when he was mayor of Carmel, California, and then he squinted.
Then it became fake and
honorable mention to French Stewart, if anybody remembers him.
French Stewart, an actor
from 30 Rock from the Sun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so on to the
30 Rock from the Sun. That was a little two shows.
I have. Nothing that happens in the next year will make me feel more like a father
than 30 Rock from the
30 Rock from the Sun. Yeah.
What? Huh? Okay. Yeah. Now, having said all that, finally the substance. Mike Pence is a fool. Nobody's surprised by that, but it goes to their worldview that, if we don't care about it, why should you care about it? And I think that there's an interesting debate as to whether these guys are consciously corrupt or systemically corrupt. So here's what I mean by that. So did ExxonMobil's of the world, although in this case even ExxonMobil's a little like, really? We're going to back out of Paris Agreement? That seems a little harsh, right? Anyway, go to the Mike Pences of the world and go, hey, brother, here's a check. So you're obviously going to do whatever we tell you. I don't think so. I think that they find the squinting fake guys like Pence and go, because it's a country of 330 million people, and they go, hey, listen, we need some person who's willing to think that, climate change is no big deal, and it's something liberals care about for reasons that I didn't even bother to investigate. Yeah. I'm not intellectually curious enough to try to figure out why liberals might oppose it. And it's an interesting admission also that apparently the world is made up of an enormous amount of liberals, that it's overwhelmingly liberal because every country but us and Syria and Nicaragua have signed this deal. By the way, Nicaragua didn't sign it. We found out yesterday because of our stage manager, because it
didn't go far enough.
Yeah, it didn't go far enough, right? So we're alone with the Syrians and whoever the Syrians are at this point, right? Yeah. In saying that we reject science, and so apparently the rest of the world is all liberal.
But the key to me, the most telling moment is just there at the end. He says that Obama got us saddled with Kyoto and with the cap and trade. They love to bring up Obama when it's not really a question about Obama. But then he said it got us saddled with Paris, saddled in an international agreement. We're made up of international agreements. Yeah. We have NATO, of course, which they don't like, is an international agreement. The United Nations,
the League of Nations,
right. Saddled. The League of Nations was an international agreement. The UN is an international agreement. The Paris Peace Treaty and the Vietnam War was an international agreement. They're all international agreements.
And I would love for someone to ask the follow-up question to him. So, okay, you think it's just lefties, they're crazy, they're obsessed with it, that's why all but 3 countries have signed on to it. Why do you believe that all of those other countries have agreed to this? If it just wrecks economies and destroys economic growth, why are so many of them so enthusiastic and passionate about this? Because they know basic facts like that the solar industry is growing faster than most industries, faster than any other energy-based industry, that there are 10 times as many workers in the solar industry now than there are in coal. That's why countries like China and conglomerations of European countries are building gigantic offshore wind and solar power generating plants. The cost of solar is becoming more and more competitive against non-renewable forms of energy, and the idea that this is an economic burden for our country is so short-sighted, so false, and so bought off by the energy companies. I mean, we looked into all of the donations that the senators who were pushing for him to come out of Paris, of course, all of them, gigantic donations from oil companies, but there is just tremendous economic growth that could come from America becoming the leader on all of these forms of renewable energy. I mean, we send our politicians to Saudi Arabia to sell, the products of Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and all that, and Boeing. Why not sell solar panels? Why not sell...
In Saudi Arabia, come on.
None of sun. Like, why not do that? Why shouldn't we be the leader for the next 100 years? Why should we step back and allow China to take that? That's what's going to wreck our economy over the next 100 years.
Wasn't that an international agreement with Saudi Arabia? 110 billion.
An international agreement to fight terrorism,
it's
commemorated by holding a glowing orb.
Comfortable with that international agreement. Our international agreements with Israel to sell them weapons and give them support. Jennifer Granholm got into a great argument on CNN with Rick Santorum, another squinter, because he said, we're in a fracking revolution driving down the cost of electricity. She pointed out that solar and wind are cheaper. She said China is canceling 107 of its coal plants because solar and wind are cheaper than coal. She said than coal, the same kind of thing is happening in India. And to your point earlier, John, she said there are almost 90,000 jobs in clean energy right now in Michigan.
Yeah, and China has expected that it's actually going to meet its Paris requirements ahead of schedule. If they can do it, can't we do it?
Yeah, and finally, I want to turn to Trump. On Thursday, he said a cynic would say the obvious reason for our economic competitors and their wish to see us remain in the agreement is so that we continue to suffer this self-inflicted major economic wound. So it also speaks to their worldview. And Trump thinks, well, what would I do? I would make an agreement with someone else to make sure that I hurt them and that I win, and most importantly, they lose.
Yeah.
So if we sign this agreement, the other countries must want them to win and us to lose. That's how he sees the whole world.
If I were a businessman, and I now know some businessmen, and they liked the idea. Businessmen liked the idea of a businessman running the country, right? Mm-hmm. That's why I'd be most irritated right now, because he's ruining it. Because somewhere out in the world, there might be a businessman who might run his business in that way or similar to Trump's, but would have recognized, because he's a smart guy, instantly that running the country is not the same thing. Donald Trump is not making that assessment.
Let's call that guy, for example, Rex Tillerson.
But Trump thinks that it's exactly the same, so that every deal has to be won. Whereas we win security-wise frequently when we make deals where the other side also wins.
Yeah,
but we're underplaying the personal part of this too. That he takes some kind of, I'm going to renegotiate this. I'm going to do something better. Everybody doesn't want me to do this, and the people who don't want me to do it are the people that are trying to tear me down all week long when I'm away. And so I'm going to come back and I'm going to say no. Screw you, Angela Merkel. Screw you, CNN. Screw you, Macron. And that there's this whole infantile. This is why when I was listening to Mike Pence, I was saying, God, I can't believe this is the man I want to be president right now. Yeah. But it's true, and it's because of the stuff that Cenk just said about the president, and that can't be overlooked in this too. Yeah. Is taking this and saying I'm going to get a better deal. Well, fortunately, there's this wall right now that he has, ironically, kind of built with leaders around the world who are not going to let him renegotiate this, or so they say now, which I think is good too.
And you do have to bear in mind, he wants to renegotiate this wholly voluntary agreement.
Yeah. And so
that has the goal of just saving our civilization.
So last two things on it is I keep coming back to this anecdote of a friend of mine who negotiated a deal in one of Trump's bankruptcies. And they had worked it out so that the creditor was a little bit better off, and Trump was actually a little bit better off, and people could keep their jobs. And Trump turned away that deal because it wasn't his idea. And so that really goes to exactly what Michael was saying about this deal.
Yeah.
And it's really sad for our country that we have elected someone who doesn't even believe in the concept of win-win. And ideally, that's exactly what you want in a president who could bring together environmentalists and business interests and create a win-win, who could bring together liberals and conservatives and create a win-win, et cetera. And he just doesn't even believe in the concept.
Yeah.
So he thinks if we made a deal and the Europeans and the rest and Chinese and the rest of the world are happy with it, by definition, we must have lost and they must have won, so I'm going to tear this apart. I know what you're thinking. Cenk, what do I get if I'm a Young Turks member? Well, I'm glad you asked. Not only do you get the whole 2-hour show on demand anytime you want, ad-free, but you get 6 podcasts on top. What are they? Join up, find out, they're amazing. You're gonna love these shows. TYTnetwork.com/join.